It's not because they sound bad. It's not because of poor build quality. And it's definitely not because they're ugly. They're not. These are my top 5 incredible vintage stereos I'll never buy again. I've been burned too many times. I can't do it. And it seems like lately there's been kind of a barrage of negativity around vintage electronics, vintage stereos, YouTube videos, Facebook, forums, you name it. I'm kind of seeing it a lot lately. And it might seem like I'm adding fuel to that fire. And I'd say you'd probably be right if, while doing the research for this video, I didn't find a few places that are specializing in some of these. So it's not all death and taxes. I do have some good news for some of these. I'll be sharing those throughout the video, and we'll have links in the description. Out of the ones we're going to go over today, this is the one I wish wasn't on this list. And unfortunately, it's one of the ones I don't really have a good solution for either, or I would definitely own one. Introduced in the mid-80s with around 160 watts per channel and an MSRP around $900, we have the Anio M504. And the 504 is not even the flagship of this series. You still have the 508 and the unicorn of the group, the Grand Integra. From the first time I saw a picture of the 504, I wanted one. I was on the hunt. And then 7 or 8 years ago, the vintage gods shined their light on me and I was able to grab one. I couldn't have been happier. I was beyond excited. These are definitely in my top 5 of best meters in an amplifier, period. And I bought my 504 knowing it didn't work. It had a channel out, so I took it to one of the best techs in Des Moines at the time and got the awful news a few weeks later that it was a lost cause. I was told that the glue that Anio used on these amplifiers became conductive, and most likely that had caused the problem with the left channel not working. I was told he was going to need to remove all that glue from all the components they used it on, which is very labor intensive and pricey. And then the worst part of the situation, even if he was able to bring the amplifier back to life, the IC chip that controls the meter movement was bad. And even worse, unobtainable. And this isn't a secret. This isn't an isolated issue. There are several threads on several forums describing this very same problem and the inability to find that IC chip. And while you might be able to find a counterfeit, even if they work for a couple weeks or maybe even a year, there is absolutely no reliability. It's just people trying to take advantage of the fact that you need one. And it's just never a solution. Not for me anyway. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of these 504s are getting parted out, which is what I did with mine. The only thing I have left of my 504 are the VU meters. I kept them almost as just a token to say that I did once have one. Never got to listen to it, but I did have one. Unfortunately, I think this era of Anio, as well as they were made, as good as they probably sounded when they were new, are just a part of vintage stereo history. So if you've got one that's still working, I would definitely have it serviced. Get all those capacitors changed out. Try and avoid a catastrophic failure, because that one's a real bummer. They are big, they're heavy, and they are so cool. They're not just a stereo, they were meant to be the focal point of your room. In the 50s through the mid-70s, everybody had a console in their house. It was like a car. You could get a cheap, inexpensive one, and then you could kind of get into crazy money with the top of the line models. I think some people bought these thinking it was going to be the last stereo they ever owned. While brands like Magnavox and Zenith were making some really incredible models, and then with German brands like Telefunken and Grundig, they were taking their cost as no object models to the next level. Even the cabinetry that came out of Germany with their European designs, in my opinion, just kind of left everything else in the dust. And the lacquer on these cabinets, it looks like an ice skating rink. They were not scared of the lacquer. We've actually had a few of the flagship Telefunken and Grundig consoles back in the day when we used to do consoles, and it was nothing to see a really nice dual turntable. They might have 8 speakers with louvered doors that would come out. It wouldn't be uncommon to have a reel-to-reel, AM, FM, and shortwave. Some of them even had wireless speaker technology to where you could put another speaker in another room. But that is the level they took these to. And I think this is also why a lot of times you hear somebody went to a garage sale, they stumbled on an old Grundig or Telefunken console. They thought for sure they were the luckiest person on earth. They hit it out of the park. The owner says it worked the last time they used it. It just needs a new needle. And if I can get it fixed for a couple $100, I'm winning, right? You don't know how many times I've heard that. Because even with the more common models, the ones that were made here in the States by Zenith and RCA, it's hard to find somebody to fix one of these things. With a stereo that was made in Germany 40 or 50 years ago, now you have a whole new list of challenges: sourcing parts, finding schematics, translating the schematics. Finding somebody today to work on a 50s or 60s Telefunken or Grundig, I think is probably harder than finding a Beatles butcher cover at Goodwill. It's almost impossible. And then to add insult to injury, you've got the cabinet. And because they poured that lacquer on so thick, over the years, most likely it's checked. You see this a lot on guitars, which also have a really thick coat of lacquer on it. After getting hot and cold so many times, that sheet of ice that's on there starts to crack. And it makes it a lot more difficult, especially for the weekend warrior type out there, to refinish and make them look good. You really need to take one of these to a professional if you want it to look right. The biggest red flag when buying vintage electronics: if they say it was working when I put it away, I haven't been able to test it, it just needs a needle, it just needs a power cord, buy it cheap or walk away. And if you enjoy our content, please hit the like button, maybe the subscribe. It really, really helps the channel, and I thank you. Imagine walking into a stereo store at the mall in the early 80s. You've got a slick salesman comes up to you. He looks like a wannabe Tom Selleck, and he says, "You haven't heard AC/DC's new album, Back in Black, unless you've heard it on 160 watt per channel Sansui 9900Z. Check it out." Take it. Take my money. And this receiver had it all. I mean, these things look incredible. They look like they mean business. And I'm sure our Tom Selleck salesman was really quick to point out that you don't have to find your station every time anymore. You don't have to scroll to tune it in stereo. The Sansui 9900Z has presets and this really cool digital readout. Tune into KGGO, select it to your number one spot, boom. Anytime you want to hear AC/DC Back in Black, hit that number one. And because Sansui knew how much we liked visualizers, they gave us just that. You've got a spectrum analyzer, and trying to get away from that 70s analog meter dated look. Of course, the 9900Z, being its early 80s, had these brand new digital power meters. And if you're glutton for punishment one day, you just want to feel rejection, take a 900Z or call up a repair technician and say, "I'm bringing down my 9900Z Sansui. It's not working. I need you to fix it." This is just one of those models that has been plagued over the years. They're overly complex with a lot of new features that they hadn't worked out yet. They're full of IC chips and proprietary parts that you just can't find. Sansui is one of my all-time favorite brands. But as soon as the 80s started rolling around and they started putting new technology into them, overcomplicating things, they just made them impossible to repair. You know, and if you've had a 9900Z since brand new, and it's worked like a top for you, you've never had problems with it, and I do believe there is that situation, I'm really happy for you because that's a really cool receiver. But as a business, you know, if I get burned once, no big deal. I'll grab another one. But if I grab two and I have the same problems, and then I hear the same thing from customers, and then I read the same things on the forums, I just can't keep on losing money on the same model when they have the same problems. And unfortunately, the 9900Z is just plagued with problems. You've got a dual operation amplifier, so an op amp, a dedicated driver IC for the spectrum analyzer, a quad 2 input NAND gate logic IC, a divided by 8 counter divider IC, likely a key part of the quartz synthesizer tuner logic. In 1975, there wasn't any of this stuff. In the 80s and 90s, if you were into stereo equipment, you knew Carver. Carver was one of the biggest names in stereo. They made a lot of really innovative, really sleek designs. Bob Carver is an absolute legend in the stereo world. He made some amazing designs. Magnetic field amplifiers, their signature sonic holography designs. I have always liked the sound of Carvers. I like the looks of them. They've kind of got that industrial, really utilitarian look to them, not flashy. I'm almost surprised they chose Harman Kardon in American Psycho and not Carver. To me, that Carver stereo equipment fits his personality just a little bit more. I've always really liked the sound of every Carver piece I've owned, and I've got a couple of them. For the last month or so, I've been using a Carver preamp and amplifier in my office area back there. And while I love it, whoever picked the font color on that thing needed to get fired, because I can't read it. It's impossible to read in a bright lit room. In a dark room, you can't read it. I can't tell what source I'm on, and that drives me crazy. And I imagine that was a short-lived thing, because I don't see how customers didn't complain about that too. And people are usually shocked when they find out it's hard to find somebody to work on Carver. The first thing they usually say is, it's Carver. The stuff was really expensive and it was really well made. And you're absolutely right. But because they use so many unique designs, they're not like traditional stereo equipment. The standard troubleshooting methods don't apply to a Carver. And therefore, understanding how they're supposed to work is a challenge. And because Carver was kind of a tight-lipped company, and I think they wanted to be responsible for doing all the service or maintenance on their products, it can become a real challenge just to find a decent schematic for your piece of Carver equipment. And in good news with Carver, I did discover 2 places in the United States that specialize in Carver restoration. And this is great, because for a long time, we didn't have anywhere to send anybody. And I'm not affiliated with them. I haven't used their services. That's always really good, finding somebody that specializes in something, because I will always take my piece of equipment to them, because I do think it's better with stuff like this to take it to a specialist. It might cost you a little bit more, but it also could save you quite a bit if you end up having to take it to 2 or 3 people that can't fix the problem. The Yamaha CR-X40 series of stereo receivers included the CR440, 640, 840, and 1040. And with the prior generations of Yamaha potentially being a little bit more expensive than their competitors Kenwood and Pioneer, in 1979 it seems like they tried closing that price gap a little bit, maybe cutting back on some of the costlier design choices. A buyer at this time might have had the thought, I wanted to get a Yamaha last time. It was just too expensive, but this time it looks like they're the same price. I've heard great things about them. I'm going to try a Yamaha. And it makes sense why the series sold so well. 8 years ago or so, we were seeing these receivers a lot. I was seeing them on Facebook working unserviced a lot. People were bringing them into the store either to sell us or they needed them to get repaired. And to tell you the truth, in the last 5 years, I don't think we've seen any. And there, when we first opened, we were buying and selling quite a few of them. And then we started having problems with them, customers returning them or having issues with them a couple years later. And we just decided, this line's too problematic. It's not worth the risk of selling to a customer and them having issues with it down the road. We just need to avoid them. They've got the dreaded STK packs in them. They've got these abnormally big boards that don't handle heat very well. And when those STK packs go, it usually trickles all through the other components and wipes out a bunch of those too. So they're really labor intensive for a technician to go through, troubleshoot, and then figure out everything besides the STK pack that's failed. And for Yamaha to be a little bit more competitive with Kenwood and Pioneer and the other manufacturers, they really cut corners on the cabinets. The faceplates got a lot thinner. They even got rid of the glass in front of the tuning dial. And I don't think that was just for aesthetics. All that dust is getting inside the receiver. People with curious hands wanting to touch the tuning dial. There's just no protection. To me, it just brought the aesthetics down quite a few notches. But unfortunately, the CR-X40 series from Yamaha is just a pretty big step down in one generation, where it does seem like Pioneer, Sansui, and Marantz, they might have made that same progression in 2 generations rather than just one. And like the 9900Z from Sansui, I do think these sound great. I don't think they deviated from their sound much at all. Even though these are STK packs, Yamaha really held on to their natural sound. There's no way we're all going to have the same experience. Some people are going to get really good, maybe rare units that are still working, and I could get 2 in a row that are totally dead that force me to just swear them off. It's no different with cars or anything else. And if you've had one that's been working this whole time, again, I'm really happy for you. And we really have to look at this like all of these pieces of equipment made it past their use life. You know, to say any one of these is a bad design or a bad product would just be silly. If these were failing in 5 years after they were made, that's a different ballgame. But a lot of these on here still work today, unserviced. I don't know how many more years we're going to be able to say that. And for some of them, obviously, they've started failing. So I'm not putting shade on any of them by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know if we're going to be able to say that about modern electronics. And if you're getting ready to buy a piece of vintage electronics and you might want to know some of the shortcomings of that model or that brand, definitely jump on our free Discord channel. It is a very fun, very active community that is happy to help you navigate your vintage audio journey with their experiences and help you make a good purchase. I really appreciate you watching. Definitely hit that like button, hit the subscribe. You can always unsubscribe later. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe want to learn about more pieces that you might want to steer clear of, you should definitely watch that one.